You know, I've taught webinars on Hebrew in the past. This time I wanted to, usually I dive right into the Hebrew text and how to use the Hebrew tools in accordance. This time I want to do it a little bit different and focus on the continuity of the resources that we have in accordance, from beginning with Bible text with Strong's numbers that give you some access to the Hebrew, all the way to in-depth Hebrew construct searches and all of that. I'll take about an hour to go through that. Hopefully I'll get through all that in an hour, and then we'll try to save the last half hour or so for questions. I may cheat and sneak into that time a little bit, but I'll try to save as much time as possible for questions at the end. All right, now that you've seen my smiling face, I'm going to turn off my camera so that you'll see more of the screen. I turned off the microphone, not the camera. There we go. Now, let me talk a little bit about, you know, with Hebrew. I love Hebrew. I've always loved Hebrew ever since I first took it, and it's easy for me to kind of geek out about it and get into some of the nuts and bolts of Hebrew and think it's really cool. The reality is most people that I talk to and that I teach aren't interested in all that, and their eyes will start to glaze over if you get too into the Hebrew. You know, there's a joke that often you know, the amount of Hebrew that a preacher talks about in a sermon is inversely proportional to the amount that he knows. You know, the person that knows Hebrew can communicate what the Hebrew's saying without having to say, let me tell you about this Hebrew word and that Hebrew word. So it's important when we're teaching to communicate what's in the Hebrew text. It's important to know the Hebrew text. It's important to be able to read or access or at least consult tools that can give you some insights into what the Hebrew says. Otherwise, you're always working through translation. But at the same time, it's important for us to be able to communicate that in a way that that is not overwhelming to an audience of non-Hebrew speakers. And so I kind of want to show the continuity from the tools that we can use to teach Hebrew to non-Hebrew speakers and to show them insights from the Hebrew without actually having to hit them over the head with, you know, well, let's look at the Hebrew text and let's break down the binyanim of this particular Hebrew verb, and you know, so on. So and that's why I have my my YouTube channel up here. Just want to show you that this is the context in which I sometimes will teach Hebrew. I have a YouTube channel where I teach Bible lessons, and I've got a handful of videos where I have, I call them insights from Hebrew. So they're videos where I actually dig into the Hebrew text to show some of the insights that you can gain from looking at the Hebrew. And I will occasionally show Hebrew text, but of course I'm always trying to do it in such a way that it's aimed at a non-Hebrew speaking audience. So the primary way that I do that is through Accordance's Bible texts that are tagged with Strong's numbers, and these become an entry point into Hebrew for those who can't actually read the Hebrew, don't know the Hebrew alphabet and can't read the Hebrew text. But you can hover over a word, and the keywords in the text have been, the key English words in the text have been tagged with Strong's numbers, which link to the underlying Greek or Hebrew lexical form. So I can get the dictionary form of the word by hovering over any of these words and see that, okay, well, good in Genesis 2:18 is the Hebrew word tov. And even if I can't read the Hebrew characters, I've got transliteration there. So that's one way that you can gain insight into the Hebrew, and you can actually search by key number. In fact, let's do something like, let's do ground, Adama. I can right click on ground and I can search for the key number. And that will open up a new tab, and this is essentially searched not for the English word ground, but for the key number H127, which is the Hebrew word Adama. So even with a key number text, I can do some basic key number searching. I can go into the analytics here and say, well, you know, how is that word translated into English? If I do the analysis, let me go ahead and just close that. If I do the analysis, this will show me all the different ways that Adama is translated in the ESV. Country, dirt, dust, earth, ground, land, etc. So, so you can do some sophisticated searches. We can even look for, you know, where is Adama not translated as ground. I can use the @ symbol, and everything you need to do a search is in the search menu. So if you see me doing something and you can't remember later on, well, what was that symbol that he said to use there? All of those symbols are right there in the search menu. So the @ symbol joins a tag to a word. And so if I insert the @ symbol, I can say, all right, well, show me all the occurrences of Adama where it is not, I'm going to do the minus sign for not, translated as ground. And I do that, and I get all the other occurrences, earth, land, soil, etc. So you can do some pretty sophisticated searches just with the key number text. The other thing that you can do with the key number text, I've shown you how you can search. I've shown you how you can hover over a word to get the details in instant details down at the bottom. By the way, the instant details can be accessed. You can have it open by clicking on instant details in your toolbar, and you'll have the instant details box open, and you can see the instant details there. So that will give you the Strong's number and the corresponding Hebrew word. You can also access the instant details even when you don't see the instant details box. So if I close the instant details, if you just click and hold on a word, it will bring up an instant details popover. Now I rarely use this when I'm in the main view of Accordance because I always have the instant details box open. But there are other times, like if I go into reading mode, I don't have the instant details box in reading mode. But if I still want the instant details, I just click and hold and I've got those there. So that's a little trick to be aware of. All right, so you've got your instant details. Another way that you can view the Strong's information is by opening up the interlinear. So I'll just show the traditional interlinear. And I did that through this little icon here that looks like a series of lines interleaved, right? So that's the interlinear button. And you've got a number of different interlinear sort of presets. So traditional interlinear, I've got one for Greek text. I don't know if this is one that that's typical or if it's one that I made, but you can see there's no Greek equivalence to this because we're in Hebrew. And then I've got one for transliteration and gloss. So you can set up your interlinear presets to give you the information that you want, or you can just go and say, you know what, okay, let's start with this, but I also want the part of speech. And you can add that information. So, so that's why we call this the dynamic interlinear, because you can set whatever view that you want. But let's go back to just the traditional. The traditional interlinear gives me the Strong's number for the word, its lexical form, and then its part of speech to tell you what's a noun, what's a verb, and so on. And notice that, again, it's only the keywords that are tagged with Strong's numbers. Now, this is one of the limitations of the Strong's numbered text, is they're basically doing nouns and verbs. They're not always doing particles and prepositions and so on. So if we go down to, for example, Genesis 2:20, the man gave names to. Now, there's, in one of those videos that I showed you, I talk about how Adam gave names to all the animals, and that there's a word play in here based on the Hebrew preposition la, which is what's typically translated as to. So in Hebrew, when you give a name to someone, you call a name to it. So here's the verb for call, but notice that the twos, each of these twos doesn't have the preposition la. So in that video, I couldn't just show the interlinear and make my point. I had to go to the Hebrew text itself. So let's actually put the Hebrew in parallel just to show you what I mean. So here, on the ground, man gave names. All right, so here's names. So the man called names to. There's the to, and I can see that in the Hebrew, but it's not reflected in the Strong's numbers. So the Strong's numbers are a great tool, and they're a great link to the Hebrew, but that is a limitation, that not every Hebrew word is represented in the English Strong's number text. Most of them only do the major words. Okay, so I'll get back to the Hebrew in just a minute. But the interlinear becomes a way to illustrate information in the Greek or the Hebrew. Another thing that you can do, I've shown how, let's turn the interlinear off, and let's do something like this. I'm going to turn on the live click, and well, before I do that, with the Hebrew, the lexical form that is represented by that Strong's number becomes a link to that Hebrew word. So I can go from the English text to all kinds of Hebrew resources in accordance. So if I triple click a word, it will, oh, that's interesting. Oh, because it's beast. I was thinking it was Behema, and it's a living thing. So it brought up the Hebrew word for living thing, animals. And so notice that it opened up the Hebrew dictionary, the Hebrew lexicon, Halot, and it searched for that Hebrew word and the associated verse that I triple clicked in. So not only does it highlight the Hebrew word, it also highlights the relevant section in the article, which is really helpful because in Halot and BDAG, some of these longer lexicons, the scripture references are really abbreviated and they're long articles, and you can end up searching for a needle in a haystack trying to find the relevant section of that article. By highlighting the scripture reference, we get that right away. So when I triple clicked, it went right to my main Hebrew lexicon. What you may find is when you triple click, you'll get a Strong's number dictionary. And that's actually something that can be set in the preferences. So I'm going to go to the accordance menu and go to preferences. I believe on Windows, the preferences are accessed through the edit menu. And if we go to Greek and Hebrew, I think it is, no, it's Amplify. We go to Amplify. And by the way, if I didn't know it was Amplify, I could always do something like, well, where do I go to triple click? And so I can type triple in the search field here and find triple click defaults. It'll find me the right panel of the preferences. But you can see here I've got override key number dictionaries checked, and then I've specified which Greek lexicons I want to be accessed when I triple click a key number word in a key number text. If I uncheck that and click OK, it will now use the key number dictionary that corresponds to this particular text. So if I'm in the ESV with Strong's, it'll open up Kohlenberger Mount's Hebrew Dictionary. If I'm in, say, let's do NAS 95 with Strong's and I triple click, it will open up the NAS Hebrew Dictionary. If I'm in the King James with Strong's, where is it? It will open up the Greek Strong's Dictionary. So, or I'm sorry, the Hebrew Strong's Dictionary. We're in Hebrew. So there are specific dictionaries that are linked to specific key number texts, but you can override that so that it just takes the Hebrew word and looks it up in your main Hebrew dictionary. So if you have a more expensive, more thorough Greek lexicon or Hebrew lexicon that you've added on, you can go to the preferences under Amplify and choose Override Key Number Dictionaries and choose which lexicon you want to use. All right, so that's triple clicking from a key number text. And then let's do live click. So live click is sort of similar to triple clicking, but it's even more automatic. Now, for me, I'm sort of old school, and I'm also kind of clumsy with my trackpad, and I'm constantly clicking when I don't mean to. So I usually keep live click turned off because I don't want to click accidentally and get a bunch of information. But with it turned on, and that's all I have to do to turn it on, I can click on a word, and it will look up that word in every Hebrew lexicon that I own. So you can see all of the different lexicons, and it's searching both the Hebrew entry field of those lexicons and then also the Hebrew content fields of those lexicons. So you'll see the same lexicon appear several times. TLOT, well, here I see BDB, BDB abridged, that's BDB complete, all Hebrew, and so on. So it's going to do the search so that you're sure to find that occurrence of that word no matter what field it's in. And then you'll also get the word usage research panel that will search every Strong's numbered text for that key number. So it's searched for the Hebrew word in every single Strong's numbered Bible that I have. So here's the JPS with Strong's, and there's every occurrence of that word in the JPS. So it becomes a great way to do a word study just from the English text. You just live click and you get all kinds of information that you can then explore. And you can go into the live click settings by clicking this little gear, and you can tweak how you want the information to appear. Okay, so we've spent about 20 minutes in the English. Let's get more into the Hebrew now. And one of the things that I want you to see, even from the English, is that when you add a Hebrew text to accordance, a grammatically tagged Hebrew text to accordance, accordance will leverage the information that's in that text and bring it into even your interactions with the key numbered text. So let's see how this works. I'm going to add a parallel, and I'll put the Hebrew text in parallel. Now, we've already done this, and you've already kind of seen this. When I have the Hebrew in parallel with the English, when I hover over a word in the English or a word in the Hebrew, we get this cross highlighting. So I can immediately track and see, okay, well, what is this Hebrew word? How is it translated into the ESV? Okay, well, that's the word for field. or, you know, well, where is the word for brought? You know, I may not be that strong in Hebrew, at least not strong enough that I can kind of skim and immediately recognize, oh, well, that's the word for brought, but I can hover over the English and see where it is and be able to then track, okay, what's going on in that section of the verse that I'm wanting to look at. So you have the cross highlighting that helps you. You also have, when you're looking at the Hebrew text, you can position yourself, position your cursor over a word, and you will get the full parsing for that particular word. So look down in the instant details here, and I was hovering over yatzar here, formed, and you get the inflected form of the word, so the word as it appears in the text, which is yitzer, and you get transliteration of that. Then you get the lexical form, yatzar, that's the dictionary form of the word. So if I were to triple click that word, that's what would be found in Halat. And then you get the full parsing information. So you get the part of speech, verb, kal, vav consecutive, third masculine singular. And then you'll get the gloss, an English gloss, which is basically just a rough definition. It may not be, you know, it's certainly not contextualized to this particular occurrence in this particular verse, but it gives you the basic definition of that word. And then it'll give you the ESV word that corresponds. So notice how when I hover over Yitzer and I have the ESV in parallel, it gives me the ESV word in the instant details. Also, you have, if you have the Hebrew syntax, a Hebrew syntax installed, Accordance will give you the syntactical tag for that word. So this verb is part of the predicate of that particular verb, that particular verse, that sentence. So you've got all of this information in the Hebrew, much more information, and of course you've got every Hebrew word as opposed to just the keywords in the English Strong's text. But notice now when I hover over a word in the English, notice how in the instant details I also get all of the information from the Hebrew text. So let me freeze that so we can point this out. So here we've got the Strong's number, the corresponding Hebrew word, and then the transliteration of that Hebrew word. But the next line gives me the corresponding information in my Hebrew text. Now that will appear whether I have the Hebrew text displayed or not. So if I go to ground, even though the Hebrew is hidden and in the background, Accordance still leverages that information and pulls it into the instant details box. So now I've got all of that parsing information. So if I go to formed, notice I get the same information: yitzer, verb, kal, vav consecutive, third masculine singular, and the gloss and everything. So in Accordance, you don't necessarily need to be using the Hebrew and looking at the Hebrew and reading the Hebrew to benefit from actually having the Hebrew text in your Accordance library. And you know, this is sort of my my dilemma. I don't ever want people to buy stuff that they're not going to use. So you know, I have been known to discourage people who don't read Hebrew from spending their money on getting the Hebrew or the Greek text. But over time, it becomes harder to make that argument because Accordance is now leveraging so much of that information, even when you're in the English. So now if you can swing installing the Hebrew, even if you don't read Hebrew, you'll benefit from it because you've got all of that parsing information and you've got the transliteration that will help you pronounce the words. So it's not as though you actually need to be able to read the Hebrew letters to be able to benefit from the Hebrew. And that said, Of course, I'd encourage anybody to study Hebrew and learn Hebrew and actually work with the Hebrew text, but I know that's not necessarily feasible for everybody. And Accordance enables you to benefit from these tools and leverage all of that information. So, so there are links between the English and the Hebrew. And even if you do read the Hebrew and you can work with the Hebrew directly, there are also benefits to having the English text with Strong's numbers because you can do all kinds of cross-text searches. So I'm trying to think of an example here that I've used. I can think of plenty of examples, but let's do this. Let's search for let's search for the Hebrew word ezer, which is the word translated as helper fit for him in the ESV. So I'm going to go up to the search menu, and we've got this new command that's been added in Accordance 13 called the text command, which enables me to leverage the links between Strong's texts and Greek and Hebrew texts, and I can also use the MTLXX parallel. If that's installed, then I've got links to the Hebrew and the Greek Septuagint. So there are all kinds of things, all kinds of links between texts that we can exploit. And we can, oops, see there, that's why I keep the live click unchecked, because I just accidentally clicked. So here I'm going to go up to the search menu, and I'm going to go to enter command. And this is the other thing. If you can't remember these commands that I show and you go, well, what was that command that he talked about? Well, you can go to the search menu and go to enter command, and all of the commands are listed there. And the one that I'm going to use is the text command, because we're leveraging another text to search the ESV. So let's say that I want to search the ESV for any English word that is translating the Hebrew word ezer, and I believe that's O-Z-R is how that would be spelled, and I'll just click OK. So this inserts into my argument entry box that I want to search for, I'm searching the ESV, that's my search text, but I want to search for words that translate the Hebrew word ezer from the Hebrew Bible. I did do that right. Yeah, it is an ayin, not an aleph. Okay, so when I hit return, I'll make him a helper fit for him, helper fit for him. The God of my father was my help. With your hand, let's see. Hear, O Lord, the voice of Judah, and bring him into his people with your hands. Contend for him and be a help against his adversaries. So most of these are help, but the interesting thing is that in most cases, the word ezer is used in reference to God. It is God as our help. It is a divine source of help. And so that raises some interesting parallels to God's provision of Eve for Adam. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. It'll stop in just a second. All right, so so you have the text command, which enables you to, again, leverage stuff from the Hebrew text. Or let's do a text command like this. Let's go to the enter command, text, and I'm going to choose the Hebrew Bible as my search text, and then I'm going to enter a tag. And so I'll say, let's do verb, and let's choose imperative. So now I'm going to search the ESV with Strong's for any English word that is translating a Hebrew imperative verb. And here we go. So here are now the commands derived from the Hebrew: be fruitful, multiply, fill, fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, have dominion. Lamech commands his wives, hear my voice, listen to what I say. Then God commanding Noah, make yourself an ark. So we've just done a very powerful search based on all of that Hebrew tagging information, but we've done it without actually having to search the Hebrew text. So there are a number of ways that you can link the English with the Hebrew and leverage the power of the Hebrew. All right, so I think I've beaten that drum enough. Let me switch my search text here to the Hebrew, and let's spend some time actually searching the Hebrew and talking about how you do that. Now, when you search the Hebrew, you, well, actually, before we do that, let's just talk about the way that the Hebrew database works. And I'm just going to go to Genesis here. And when I hover over the Hebrew text, notice that if we're looking at the text, what's the first word in Hebrew? Well, the first word is Bereshit. But Bereshit is actually technically a phrase. It's a combination of the preposition ba and the noun reshit. So, you know, what is a word in Hebrew? Well, you know, a word is either a cluster of letters between spaces, or it's an actual lexeme, a lexical form that that carries meaning. So whether this is one word or two, I guess is open to debate. But the Hebrew database actually accounts for prefixed and suffixed lexical forms that are attached to other lexical forms. And so it splits up these words. And this is what's called morphological separation. So you have ba being treated as a separate word. And you can see down in the instant details, it's got its own parsing information, right? It's a preposition. It means in, at, with. And then you have reshit. So you have inflected form, lexical form. You have the root. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. And then the parsing information and so on. So when you are looking at the Hebrew text, you're actually looking at all of these different words that are separated. And it's important to understand that. It's also important to understand that when you search in Hebrew, accordance assumes that you want to search by lexical form and find every inflection of that lexical form. So let's just take the verb bara. All right, I'm going to, well, I won't switch. I'll show you that if I just start typing, even though I've got it set to verses, and it looks like I've typed the word bra, I've typed the letters that represent the Hebrew word bara, and it's already recognizing, well, this is not a scripture reference. So it's ready to give me whatever, whatever Hebrew search corresponds to what I've typed. If I hit return, it will switch the mode of the search from verses to words, and it will find every inflection of the lexical form bara. So, so here, notice that it inserted bara here. Well, the first occurrence of bara kind of corresponds to the lexical form, right? It's just bet, resh, aleph. But what it's actually searching on is not this first word. That's the inflected form. That's the form as it appears in the text. It's actually searching on this lexical form that represents every occurrence of that particular lexeme. So it finds bara, but it also finds yivra, which is a different inflected form. It now has the yud in front of it, but it's still searching for that lexical form. That's what's being searched. So the default search in Hebrew is for lexical forms, and it finds every inflected form of that lexical form. Okay, so if I want to find a particular inflected form, how do I do that? Let's say I want to find Hivra. All right, so I'm going to copy that and paste it in here. Well, if I just hit return, actually what it's probably going to do, well, let's see what it does. It's going to tell me that it doesn't recognize that lexical form, and it's actually going to give me a way to go to a literal search, which would actually work, but I'm going to say no. So it's saying I don't recognize what that lexical form is because it's expecting this to be a lexical form. So when I enter an inflected form, the form as it appears in the text, I have to do something a little different. I have to indicate that by putting quotes around the word. And if I do that, now I get Hivra, and it's interesting. Oh, it's because it did the equal sign. Sometimes it's accordance is anticipating what you want to do, and it's doing things for you. In that case, I didn't want it to do that. But, and I'll explain what the equal sign is in just a second. But here, I've just said, okay, I want to find inflected forms that match these consonants. All right, and so now it's found every time there's Hivra or Hibare or Hibara or whatever it is. Okay, so so that's inflected forms. And by the way, one of the handouts that I gave you is, let's see, I had this set up and now I'm trying to remember how to do it. Users, desktop. I had this copied so I could paste it right in, and then I copied something else at some point, and I can't remember what I called it. Hebrew verb chart or whatever. And I can't remember, but one of the charts that I gave you, it actually lays out these different characteristics of how do I search for a lexical form? What do I use to search for an inflected form? How do I make sure that vowel points are considered, and so on? So I'm going through this material, but you've got a handout that will give you a handy chart of all of that material. All right, so so the quotation marks tell Accordance to search for an inflected form. The other thing to be aware of is that Accordance defaults to looking for inflected forms, and Accordance also defaults to ignoring vowel points. So if I do, let's just copy something like Shemayim in here. And well, you know what, let's actually do this. Let's find the word Erev. All right, so it should be, let's see, where's the first day end? Well, let me look at the English. I've talked about being helped by the English. So what I'm trying to get to is there was evening and there was morning, right? So so there was evening. That's the Hebrew word Erev. And I'm going to copy that word and paste it in and hit return. Now, notice what happens. I pasted, well, let's do it again. It was set to verses. So let me paste it in. All right, so I've got Erev with the vowel points. I'm going to get rid of the little quick entry thing. So I've got Erev with the vowel points. And when I hit return, it does the search and it finds 220 occurrences. Now let's see what we got from our search. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the analytics and I'm going to do the analysis. And here's an interesting thing. So I did this search for Erev with the vowel points that ought to indicate evening, the word for evening. But I found all of these other lexical forms, arov, arav, etc. So I got a very broad search, and only some of these occurrences mean the word that I actually copied and pasted. The reason for that is even though the vowel points are there, even though I pasted them in, Accordance ignores them by default, strips them out, and just searches for the consonants. So it's done an unpointed search for any lexical form that has ayin resh bet as the consonant. Okay, so why does Accordance do that? Why do we ignore the vowel points? Well, we do that because we don't want a first semester Hebrew student to have to try and keep straight. Well, do I type a segol or a sere here? You know, it's hard enough to learn Hebrew, and it's hard enough to begin using the computer-aided, you know, tools that we can use to foist trying to keep vowel points straight on a beginning student, or even, frankly, somebody with experience like myself. You know, I don't always care about the vowel points when I paste something in. I just want to do a quick search, and then I can zoom in on whatever it is that I'm interested in. So so we ignore the vowel points by default. However, you can use the vowel points to distinguish between different lexical forms. So the way you do that is with the equal sign. Now remember how Accordance had inserted the equal sign for me? So if I put the equal sign, now Accordance is going to take those vowel points into account. And let me do this before I do the search. Let's, instead of doing Erev, let's copy arov. And so I'll do equals arov. All right. That distinguishes the lexical form arov, which means swarm, from Erev and every other lexical form. Okay. So the equal sign narrows that search down to an exact lexical form based on the vowel pointing. All right, so that's useful because that narrowed down a bunch of different lexical forms that were not what I may have been interested in. Let's go back to taking the equal sign out. Now it's ignoring the vowel points. It finds me every lexical form that has those vowel points. Now notice the vowel points for Erev, the two segols, will get me only so far. Erev will distinguish my search from all of these other ayin resh bet verbs, but or nouns or whatever. But in this case, there are two nouns that are spelled Erev. There's evening, which is the more common one, and then there's Erev, which represents Arabia. So when you have homonyms like that, you have these, or actually I guess they're homographs, you have these homograph numbers that are used where the people tagging the database have said, okay, well that's Erev evening, not Erev Arabia, and they've numbered Erev evening as Erev-1 and Arabia as Erev-2. So if I merely copy Erev and then put the equal sign in front of it, Accordance is going to say, wait a minute, which Erev do you want? Do you want evening or do you want Arabia? And so it'll bring up the word list, and I can choose, where is it? It's down there somewhere. Evening. Okay. So you've got to have, if you have the equal sign, you have to have the homograph number. Otherwise, Accordance is going to say, well, I don't know what word you're searching for, what word you're wanting to, what lexical form you're wanting to search for exactly. But now, with the homograph number, it will find Erev evening. Okay, so that's exact searching. You use the equal sign, and the equal sign tells Accordance, pay attention to the vowel points. But it also means pay attention to those homograph numbers as well. So be aware of that when you want to do a search. Now, the nice thing is, if I just type in Ayin Resh Bet, I've got the quick entry list here that gives me the unpointed options, but it also gives me the pointed options. So I can go down and I can find, well, where's evening? That's got to be in there somewhere. Evening. And so I can select that and do the search that way. Okay, so so that's the equal sign for exact searching, for taking the vowel points into account. Now, what if I want to find Erev where it's only spelled Erev? Let's go back to our analysis here. Now, the analysis defaults to listing every lexical form that was found by my search. And in this case, I only searched for one lexical form, all right, Erev-1, which means evening. I can actually go into the gear menu here and choose Customize Display, and I'll drag the inflect item underneath the lexical form to show inflected forms, the inflected forms that were found. So let's click OK. And here we can see that even though we did a search for the lexical form Erev with the two segols, well, that's the lexical form, but sometimes it's inflected differently. Perhaps there's a prefix that changes the vowel points and so on. That's one of the things that makes learning Hebrew hard. It's not that Hebrew is really a difficult language. It's actually a fairly simple language, but it's all these variations in the vowel points and things that can get so confusing. But with Accordance, all of that's taken into account. So I did my search and used the vowel points to distinguish Erev from other Ayin Resh Bet verbs and nouns. But notice that it still found all kinds of inflections of Erev. So it found it in the plural and so on. So what if I want to find just Erev, where it looks exactly like that, and I don't want to find Arbaim and Arev and so on. I just want to find Erev. What I'm going to do is I'm wanting to search for an inflected form, but I'm wanting the vowel points to be considered in my search. To do that, you have to use the quotation marks to indicate an inflected form, but the equal sign to indicate I want the vowel points to be paid attention to. And so if I hit return, now I've done an inflected search for Erev, but notice what's happened. So I've said I want to find Erev where it looks just like that in the text. But now I have other lexical forms showing up because Erev Arabia also appears as Erev in the text, and Erev-2, which means mixture, also appears as Erev in the text. So you've got, when you search for an inflected form, you may turn up several lexical forms that are inflected that particular way. So it's important to understand how to do these kinds of searches and when to use the quotation marks, when to use the equal sign. Let me go ahead and open it up for questions on that before I move on, because that's about the trickiest thing of using Hebrew in Accordance. And while you're unmuting yourselves, if anybody has a question, let me also explain how this is a little different for those of you that are coming from BibleWorks, if you've had experience with BibleWorks. I think one of the hardest things for BibleWorks users to get used to in Accordance is that in BibleWorks, what they do is they take the Hebrew text, the Hebrew database, and they kind of split it in two. And so they'll give you the inflected text, and then they'll have a separate text that has the lexical forms and the tagging information. And those two texts are two sort of separate modules, but they're linked so that you can do tagged searches of the Hebrew and see the results in the inflected text. But they kind of bifurcate that one database into two texts. In Accordance, we don't do that. We have the one database that has all of this information, right? Inflected form, lexical form, parsing, and so on. And we use different search syntax to indicate, well, what am I searching? Am I searching the lexical form? Am I searching the inflected form? Do I want vowel points to be considered, or do I want them to be ignored? And so that's what this notation is designed to do. All right, is that any questions on that?
Looks like we have a question from Randy Martins. Randy, you can unmute yourself. And if you can't, maybe I can do it. Let's see.
Or if you're having trouble, you can type a question into the chat and
that's true. Yeah, and that's
I got it unmuted.
Oh,
He's
thanks.
unmuted.
And that's true for everybody. If you have any questions at all, we're trying to answer them as quickly as we can if you type them in. But also, I'll save some till the end of the class if there are some that you want to ask David specifically. And so feel free to type those things in. But yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Hi, David. I just recently downloaded, let's say within the last couple of months, Accordance. And so I'm fairly new to this. Now, I was trying to follow you at the beginning to get the Hebrew text up. Is that a separate module you have to buy that's not included in the trial version?
Right. They're in our Accordance Lite, we probably have a demo version of the Hebrew text. I think we include that, which will have the first 3 chapters of Genesis. And so it'll be, it would appear under, well, if you go into your library and you go into text, you should see something that says Hebrew Bible Demo or something like that. I may be wrong on that. It may not be included anymore, but I know we used to. But yes, the full Hebrew text is a separate module that's included with some of our higher end packages, or you can purchase it individually.
Actually, to let you know, we do have the Hebrew text, the HMT full text with tagging in our specialty starter, that we do have that special coupon today at 50% off. So for under $50, we have a Hebrew language specialty starter.
Great. And that's, I don't think you can buy the Hebrew text for by itself for that. So that's a great deal.
Now, also, just maybe it's a little extra outside of what you're teaching, because I know you're focusing on Hebrew now. Is it the same thing for Greek?
Yes. Yes. So we should have a Greek demo too, and then the Greek text is a separate purchase, or it's included in certain packages.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have quite a few. Is it only the ESV that's linked to the Strongs? And
nope,
is there a way to do these search texts with other English texts? But yeah, any other Strong's text?
Yes, we have quite a few texts that are tagged with strong. So the ESV is one that's kind of included in most of our packages. And then we have the CSV with Strongs. The HCSV with Strongs, I don't know that we still sell that because now it's been kind of replaced by the CSV. We have the Mounts New Testament with enhanced Strong. So that's for the New Testament with Greek. And when you see enhanced GK numbers, let me go ahead and open that up just to show you what that is. Here's an example. So you've got what then shall we say? Well, let's do the ESV in parallel. So if I do what then shall we say is the word that's tagged, because it's the word that most closely links to the Hebrew or the Greek word. We're in Greek now. So say corresponds to Lego, but shall we say is actually, all of this is inherent in the inflection of the word Lego in this particular instance, right? It's a rumen, which is first plural, future active indicative. So shall we say is all translating that particular word. So the ESV with regular Strong's numbers just tags the word say, and you've kind of got to know, oh, well, the shall and the we are all part of that. But the Mounts NT, or the NIV with enhanced GK numbers, actually links the other words, the supporting words, with that word that's been tagged. So it's a little more sophisticated and gives you even more, an even better feel for how the text links to the Hebrew. So that's what enhanced GK numbers means. It gives you these phrase kind of highlights. Okay, so that's the Mounts. And the NIV 2011. The NIV 1984 we no longer sell, which is a shame, but again, when publishers have a new edition, they don't really want us to keep selling the old edition. We have the NRSV with Strong's, the NASB 95 with Strong's, the Net Bible with Strong's, and then the KJV with Strong's, and the New King James with Strong's, and the JPS, which I probably have under Jewish text or something like that. But the JPS version is also a text with Strong's numbers. We have the Hebrew New Testament with Strong's. So I actually used that in a recent video where somebody had made the claim that when Jesus said, "Follow me," that the Hebrew word that he would have used was a word that meant pursue. And so I did a video on, well, is that really the case? And I actually used the modern Hebrew New Testament and put it in parallel with the Greek of the verse, that the New Testament verse that was being cited, and showed, well, lo and behold, this particular translation doesn't actually translate it with a Hebrew word that means pursue, and for what it's worth, and went into that whole thing. So there are even Hebrew New Testaments with Strong's numbers that are really useful. So any of those texts with the Strong's numbers will give you that cross highlighting and let you use the text command and so on. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, a question on, just a simple one on, how do you enter Hebrew characters if you're not really sure which keys correspond on the keyboard to a particular letter?
Great question, and I should have addressed that from the very beginning. So the Hebrew keyboard that Accordance uses is our own keyboard layout of our own font. And if you're just learning Hebrew and you're not familiar with some other Hebrew keyboard, then you can just learn the characters associated with our font, and that can be done. It's relatively straightforward. For example, Vayikra, the Q is for the Vav, we use a W. And then for Yud, we use Y. Most of these are fairly easy to guess. For the Kof or Kuf, it's Q, Resh is R, Aleph is A, and so on. But of course, what do you do for Het? What character do you use for that, and so on? Some of those more unusual, less directly corresponding to English characters, how do you find those? Well, we have a window called the Characters palette, and you can open that up from the window menu, and this will actually give you all the Hebrew characters, and you can click a character and it'll insert that particular character. So you can begin kind of selecting, all right, well, I want these particular characters and start typing. You can even do, well, I want this vowel point to be under, that letter and so on. So I'll open up the Characters palette again and do a different vowel point under that letter and so on. So you can use this to type. You can also use it to learn the keyboard equivalents. So if I go over final kaf, it'll show me down here the name of the letter. It's kaf, and it shows me, notice that's a capital K. So if I want to type a final kaf, I type a capital K. Now, in accordance, the nice thing is if I just type a K, it will, if I type it at the end of a word, it'll put in a final kaf. If I then add another character, it'll change that kaf to a medial kaf and so on. So, but if I specifically want to type a final kaf, I can hold the Shift key down and type that myself. So, so the character palette is really the best way to learn the keyboard. And you can see here, I actually have it in my toolbar. So I've added it to the toolbar. I don't think it's part of the standard toolbar. And to do that, all you do is right or control click on the toolbar. And on Mac, you can go to Customize Toolbar, and you'll get all of the different options here. And I just went and found the character palette. Where is it? Here, and dragged it in where I wanted it. And then when you're done, you click Done. On Windows, it's a little different. You choose Customize Toolbar, and you get a list of the current buttons that you have in the toolbar, and then the other options that are available, and you just select the options that you want and choose those. So you just choose characters from that and add it to your list of items that you want in the toolbar. But with the character palette in the toolbar, I can just click the toolbar item and pull up the character palette. Okay, and if you're learning these, once you get the consonants, you can say, well, I don't need the consonants anymore, and you can uncheck letters, and I just need help with the pointing or with the cantillation and so on. So you can customize the character palette to show you the information that you want. All right, so that's what I'd say is the best way to learn it. You can also get a keyboard layout that you can print out. If you go into the help, you can find the accordance font section, and there will be keyboard layouts in there that you can print out and so on.
Thanks, David. We have a question. Well, we actually have several questions, but I'm going to hold those till the end of the webinar.
Okay.
But we have one here, I think maybe the last one to continue on. I have the SBL Hebrew and Greek keyboards installed on my PC. Can I use these keyboards to type in words in the accordance search bar?
Yes, in fact, I meant to go there and then forgot about it. So if you go into the preferences and go into, I think this is Greek and Hebrew, you have some options for, you can, well, actually, this is not even the answer to your question. You can use the Israeli keyboard layout for Hebrew or use the Greek polytonic keyboard layout. You can do that now, but actually I think that all you need to do is, if you have another keyboard, just switch to that keyboard, and then you can type using that keyboard. It will use that keyboard layout that you have. So I believe that's all there is to that. So just, the way that you would switch to your Hebrew keyboard normally, you just do that before you enter text. All right.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think that's good. And again, we'll save some of these questions till the end, and people can keep them coming, and I'll save them for you.
Okay.
And also,
right.
We have a lot of people with their hands raised that will have questions as well, so that they haven't typed in. So
Okay.
we do have a lot of questions, David.
All right. Well, I will try to cook through some of the more advanced Hebrew stuff, and then we'll get to those questions. All right. So one other thing that I want you to be aware of with Hebrew and with searching Hebrew, one of the temptations that you'll have, when you see a Hebrew phrase, let's do Vayhi Boker. All right. So I'm just going to select this Hebrew phrase and I'm going to copy it. I want to find this Hebrew phrase. All right. Well, the temptation is to copy it and then to go up into the search bar and paste it in. The problem is, what have I just pasted in? I've just pasted in a string of inflected forms. And Accordance is going to say it can't find this. If I hit return, it's going to say the text you entered cannot be found. Because what it wants is, it wants the va to be separated from yehi, and then yehi is an inflected form, but Accordance defaults to searching for lexical forms. So what I really should put is haya, that's the lexical form, and then separate that and do boker. Now if I do that, it will find that particular phrase because I have these morphologically separated lexical forms entered. Okay, so what will tend to happen is the beginning Accordance Hebrew user will copy text in like that and then say, okay, I want to find this. How do I find it? Now, one of the things that Accordance has done is we've added the new literal search or letters search, which says, okay, well, I can't find those lexical forms that you entered because I didn't enter lexical forms, I entered inflected forms. Would you like to search with literal search? And if you say, okay, sure, notice that now the search works. It found that string of letters. Okay, so the letters search is a great fix to this problem. And if you do that, if you do copy stuff in and it says, do you want to do a letter search? Just say yeah, and you'll get what you want 9 times out of 10. But the way that I recommend you do a search for text that you want to look for is select the text and then either go to the amplify button on the toolbar and notice that the first item in the amplify menu is search whatever text you happen to have selected text in. So it's searching HMTW4 because that's the Hebrew text that I have. So I can go up here, say search HMTW4. It opens up a new tab, so it doesn't lose me what I had before. I can still keep working with that text. But it opens up a new tab, and notice how it automatically put in the v, the haya, and then erev-1. So Accordance automatically formatted the search for me. I don't have to remember, oh wait, yehi is the inflected form of haya, and I don't have to worry about any of that. Accordance does it for me. So just be aware that you can amplify any selection of text to find that string of words, and Accordance will format the whole thing exactly right for you. So it's a really powerful feature, and it will simplify your life greatly. You can even do things like, if I want to do an inflected search, I think if I hold down the Option key and go to Amplify, notice now it separated out the inflected forms and put it in quotations. So now I've done an inflected search. You can also do, I think you can do a root search that way. If I hold down the Shift key, is it? No, that's a fuzzy search. So you can actually use the fuzzy command to search for approximate phrases and so on by holding down the Shift key. So there are all kinds of ways that you can amplify a selection of text to search it. And I'll show you. Well, I don't know if I'll have time to show you the fuzzy command, but the fuzzy command basically looks for approximate phrases. You can also select some text, and then right or control click that text and do search for. And this is the same as going through the amplify. But if you can't remember, oh, well, what was that? What was the key I was supposed to hold to do an inflected search? You can just right click or control click and choose search for inflected. And that will do the inflected search and format that correctly. Okay, so either through the amplify menu or through the right click menu, you can search Hebrew phrases and things and have it all formatted for you. Okay, so let's go into a little more in-depth Hebrew stuff. Let's do, let's see, where do I want to go with this? Let's do a search for the Hebrew word moot. All right, so I typed MWT, and the first occurrence that I get is, no, that's interesting. Oh, it's because I did a letters search, because it had switched to literal search in this particular tab. It only found moat here. It didn't find tamut. What I want is to do a word search, and I want to find every occurrence of moot. And this is what I expected to happen. It noticed that it found moat, tamut. So it found you will surely die, and you shall surely die is moat in the infinitive. Let me hold down the shift key. In the infinitive, in the infinitive absolute. So this is this one. Moat is moot in the infinitive absolute in the call stem. And it also found tamut, which is moot in the imperfect second masculine singular. All right, so let's say that I want to find moat in the infinitive absolute. How do I leverage this parsing information that I have in a search? Well, I'm going to go up here to my search, and I'm going to click so that my cursor is blinking after the Hebrew word. And I'm going to go up to the search menu and go to enter tag. And again, everything that you need to fill in this blank and create a search is here in the search menu. So I'll go to enter tag, and I'll choose the right part of speech. Moot is a verb, so I'll go to verb. And then I can specify the tag characteristics that I want to find. So I could specify, well, I want the call stem. In this case, what I want is the infinitive absolute, and that's under aspect, all right? And I'll click OK, and Accordance will insert the proper search syntax for me to search for a Hebrew tag. So it's moot at infinitive absolute. And here, there's that at symbol again that we saw when we were doing key number searches. Remember that the at symbol, enter symbol, joins a tag to a word. So this is going to search not just for moot, but moot when it is tagged with the tag verb infinitive absolute. And so when I hit return, I get only the places where it's moat tagged as an infinitive absolute. Okay, so I've just used this grammatical tag to narrow down my search. And notice how easy it was to do. Also, notice that the search syntax is spelled out for me. It's not using any cryptic codes or any, I don't have to enter stuff in the right order. I used the dialog box, selected what I wanted, and got exactly what I wanted. I can also go in and I can type in tags. So if I want to say, well, I want to find just the call infinitive absolutes, I can type the call criteria, the call tag in there, hit return, and that'll perform that search. And I don't have to put call in a particular place. If I do infinitive absolute call, it still works. So Accordance is smart enough to parse this tag and understand what I'm wanting to search for. I don't even have to have it all spelled out. As long as there's enough of a tag for Accordance to recognize it, infinitive A is enough to distinguish an infinitive absolute from an infinitive construct, So Accordance will recognize that. So you can abbreviate tags, you can type tags in yourself, and as long as Accordance recognizes what the tags are, then it'll work. Now, one thing that you can't do, unfortunately, is if you're a BibleWorks user especially, let's do something like, well, I think Moot would work. Let's do noun. So I want the noun for to die. And if I do something like third masculine plural, you may be used to doing 3MP for that. Accordance doesn't recognize that, and I wish we would make it so that it can. So you would have to spell out, third, I'm not even sure if the 3 will work. Masculine, plural, yeah, I think you have to spell it out like third. So anyway, even I'm not getting that right. So let's do this. Let's go back up. So you can see, you can type tags in, but if you don't know exactly how to abbreviate them or how to spell them out, you can get yourself into trouble. So I'll just select everything after Moot, and I'll go, instead of verb, I'll go to noun, and I'll say, okay, well, number, yeah, there's no, I can do masculine. I can't do third person. I can do plural, and I can do class. So let's do masculine plural. That's why it was fussing at me, because I was trying to do a tag that's not there under noun. So anyway, you can always use the dialog box to get where you want to go. Now, notice also, I don't have to actually constrain this with a particular Hebrew word. If I do noun, masculine, plural, this may take a while, it's going to find me every masculine plural noun. So it found me Elohim, Shemayim, Elohim, Mayim for waters, and so on. So I could do a search for every noun if I wanted to. That might take a while to perform that. Well, it probably won't take that long. But so this is finding every noun in the Hebrew. That takes a couple of seconds, but now it's found me every noun in the Hebrew. All right. So that's how you search using the grammatical tags. And the dialog, if we go to enter tag, let's go to verb. Let's say that I want to find any infinitive. So I can go to aspect and I can choose infinitive construct. But now I also want to add infinitive absolute. But if I choose infinitive absolute, because this is a pop-up menu, I lose infinitive construct. All right. How do I choose multiple tags within the same category? Technically, we're actually kind of bending Apple's interface guidelines here. Technically, if we wanted to give you the option to choose any of these tags, we should use checkboxes, because that way you could check infinitive absolute, infinitive construct, and so on. But if we were to do that with every one of these tags and have a checkbox for every single one, this dialog box would be enormous. It'd take up almost the whole screen. You'd have hundreds of checkboxes, and trying to find the right one would be like finding a needle in a haystack. So what we do is we cheat a little bit, and we give you pop-up menus, which are much easier to find the tags that you want. But if you want more than one tag from one of those pop-up menus, you have this little hint down here, shift click for multiple tags. So if I've chosen infinitive absolute and I want to choose infinitive construct 2, I just hold down my shift key on my keyboard, infinitive construct, and click OK. And now it's added both of those. So, so that's how you do multiple tags within the dialog box. All right. Notice the The syntax is getting a little more computery. You know, you've got parentheses and commas and stuff, but it's still spelled out. I can see what I'm searching for. So that's how you search for grammatical tags. And even if you don't do a lot with the Hebrew, I can take this search. Let's just copy this, and let me switch my search text to the ESV with Strong's, and I'm going to do the text command. And choose Hebrew, and I'm just going to paste that. Well, I guess that's interesting. Well, it did work. It ended up going in there, right? So it just didn't display well in the dialog box. But when I do that search, now it's searching the ESV with Strong's for any English word that translates an infinitive construct or an infinitive absolute. Okay, so here's a Hifil infinitive construct. Let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light. And we can see that's translated as an infinitive, to give light. To give light, to rule, and so on, to separate. And we should see surely die should be in there too once we get to it. You may surely eat, that's an infinitive absolute. You shall surely die, there's mote that we saw before. So, so you can, once you know how to search grammatical tags, you can actually enter tags into your English searches using the text command. All right, I am out of time, and I still haven't shown you the construct window, but let's go ahead and open it up for questions. And if one of you wants to see the construct window, you can make that your question, and then I'll show it to you. But I want to give at least a little bit more time for questions.
All right, great. We've got a lot here. So let's see. My son is on a limited budget. What would be your recommendations for his first Hebrew text?
I'd go ahead and get that Hebrew starter, and that will have the, I believe it comes with the HMT W4. There is, you can also purchase the, let's see, the Hebrew text with cantillation. And, excuse me, oh no, that's not what I want. What am I looking for? It gets confusing because we've got so many different Hebrew texts. I think it's the BHS tagged. We'll have the markers for text critical stuff, and I'm not seeing any in. Oh, here we go. So here is an example of the BHST, the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia tagged, will also give the links to the critical apparatus. And so when I hover over that, you can see the critical apparatus. But for a beginning Hebrew student, that's probably overkill anyway. So unless he's a seminary student and they say, no, we want you to have the critical apparatus, you're fine getting the Hebrew starter and the basic Hebrew text.
Great. At one point early on, you mentioned something about the syntax being displayed in the instant details palette. And the question was, how do you get that to be displayed? It might be more of a question on how do you know you have the syntax add-on or not.
Right. So the syntax is, you can open up your library, and it should be after my texts. Well, let's just, I think I can just go to databases. This will give you the databases. So the syntax is a database that gets added to Accordance, and that syntactical database will sort of enhance your view of whatever text that database refers to. So syntax of the Hebrew inscription, syntax of the Qumran. We have several different syntaxes of the Hebrew, the ETCBC syntax, the our regular syntax of the Hebrew Bible is the Homestead syntax. And so you can display those syntaxes in parallel with the Hebrew text. Let's do the Homestead, and I'll also do the ETCBC so you can see the differences. Here we go. And let me just go to Genesis 1. And you can see kind of the differences between these syntaxes. So when you display them in parallel, you get a syntactical tree that is showing the clause and phrase relationships within the text. So here, here you have F means definite article, and then the C is a complement. So this is a complement phrase. If I hover over this little node, it'll give me the heavens. I'm trying to get, yeah, the heavens. This whole complement is the heavens and the earth. And so et hashamayim, the et haaretz. I know that's really small. I want to make it bigger, but if I make it bigger, it's going to be, all right, well, that's not too bad. So, so this is the complement. And the complement is sort of like the direct object, but they're not exactly the same. This is the Homestead database is using linguistic categories and linguistic terms. So if you're more familiar with traditional grammar terms, traditional syntactical terms like direct object, indirect object, and so on, the ETCBC syntactical database is more along those lines. You can see the O there. It says this is an object phrase, and this is a parallel subphrase, and so on. So it really depends on what you're used to and how you want to see the text broken down. It's useful to have both of these. So you can see here the ETCBC syntax basically handles Genesis 1:1 in kind of the traditional way that it's been translated. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth as a separate statement. The Homestead syntax takes Genesis 1:1 as the beginning of an adjunct phrase that is describing the time of creation. So this would be more analogous to, I think the JPS translation will do when God began to create the heavens and the earth. That's more reflected in this syntactical breakdown. So this is an adjunct of when God was beginning to create the heavens and the earth. This is what happened, in Genesis 1:2 becomes the main sentence, and so on. So so you'll see the syntaxes here when you display them in parallel. You'll also see the syntactical information within the instant details, and it's basically using the syntactical information of the syntax database that I've set as my default. So I've got the Homestead as my default. So you can see here, when I hover over Reshit, it says complement here. So Reshit is part of a complement phrase, and so on. So if I go to Elohim, now it says subject, because Elohim is the subject of this particular sentence, and so on. So so you'll see the syntax everywhere, and you can actually search for you can actually leverage that even within the English. Let's try something like this. Let's do God, and I'm going to do at, and then I will enter the text command, and we'll do enter tag. I need to specify Hebrew Bible, enter tag, and I'm going to choose subject from the syntactical tags down toward the bottom. So these are the traditional morphological tags, and these are syntactical tags. So I can choose God when it's tagged as the subject in the Hebrew Bible. And when I do that, now it finds in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now notice it skipped, I believe it's Genesis 1:2 says, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Well, God in that case is not the subject. So it's the object of, or it's a, what's the word? I can't remember. A positive, I think it's a positive. But anyway, it's not the subject there, and so that got excluded. So we were actually using these syntactical categories to narrow down an English search. And I have to confess, I'm not a real expert in the syntax stuff, so that's about as sophisticated as I tend to get with the syntax. But even that is really useful, even as an English search. And there are other ways that there's lots more that you can do with the syntax, but those are separate purchases that you can purchase as add-ons.
Thanks, David. We've had several people asking if you would please show the construct window, so maybe you could briefly give an example of that.
Okay, I will do that. This may be a really fast demonstration of the construct, but let's go back to our search for moot, and let's hide the syntaxes here. So we've got mot tamut. All right, so you've got you will surely die, and you've got mot in the infinitive absolute followed by moot in the imperfect. And it's the same lexical form, and that construction appears to be some kind of intensive construction, because you have you shall surely die. All right, this didn't translate it as to die, you will die, or something like that. It didn't translate it in some literal sense. So this is some kind of construction that is intensive or emphatic. You will surely die. Well, how do I search for that particular construction? One thing I can do is I can select the words, and I could amplify and look for that particular phrase. Search HMTW4. By default, it only looks for moot immediately followed by moot, and that actually gets me pretty close. But it's not any other word. You know, what if there's a case where another word comes between the infinitive absolute and the imperfect? Or what about other words, other verbs? Are there other verbs that use this kind of construction? You know, I can't find that when I'm searching for moot. So that's where the construct window comes in. The construct window lets me define more complex word relationships to find particular constructions of Hebrew. And so to open a construct window, I'm going to select my my search argument up here. And the reason I'm doing that is, well, let me give you this tip that's worth its weight in gold. One of the things that you need to realize is that when you have done a search, all right, I've done this search, and I want to do a new search. Well, what do you do when you want to do a new search? Well, typically, you know, you might go up here and then select all that and delete it, and then start typing a new search, right? But you don't have to do that. If you hit the tab key on your keyboard, Accordance will automatically select the contents of the search entry box so that I can now do a new search. All right, and I'll do that search, and then I can hit tab again, and the next thing that I type will replace whatever I searched before. So hit tab, type, and return to do rapid fire searches. So anytime I select the contents of this search entry box, Accordance assumes, okay, he wants to replace his previous search with a new search. So I'm going to hit tab and select what's up here because I want my search to be replaced by a new search. And I'm going to go up to the File menu and I'll go to New tab. And if I go down to Construct, I can choose a simple construct, that's for like English, a Greek construct, or a Hebrew construct. And the keyboard shortcuts for these are Command 1, 2, and 3, or in Windows it'd be I think it's Control 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to open up the construct and notice what happens here. I get a new window that's a graphical window, and it's automatically linked to my Hebrew Bible window. Now that link command automatically got inserted because I had selected the previous search and said, hey, I want to use this window for a new search. So Accordance automatically inserted the link command for me. But so here's now the Hebrew construct. The link command tells Accordance, don't look for my search here, look for my search argument over here in this other window, okay? So it's going to be using this window as its search argument. And what this window does is it lets me create complex constructions graphically. So you have these columns down here, and the columns represent individual words in my search. So I want to search for Mot Talmud. Let me, well, I don't have it here because of the search. Let's just add context, and it's what, 218, I think it is. No, it's 217. You will surely die, right? So you've got Mot Talmud. So I'm following this example right here. And so what I'm going to do is so I've got two words. I'm going to use the right two columns in this construct window. And I'm going to drag a verb element from the palette over there and drag it into the first column. And then I get that same dialog that lets me do, okay, let's find an infinitive absolute. And I'll click OK. Now the second word that I want to search for is a verb in the imperfect. So I'll drag verb and choose imperfect. Okay, so now I've got the two words that I want to search for. Notice that I haven't specified that they have to be moot. I just want an infinitive absolute followed by an imperfect. Now that I've defined the items that I want to search for, I can define the relationships between those search terms up here. And I do that with these connecting items. So I can say within, and I can specify, well, let's say within 5 words. What if there's a preposition or a not, or something that's stuck in here? Is it always side by side, or can there be other words in there? So I'm going to do a within of 5 to account for that. And then I'm going to do an agree item. And notice how when I drag these items over, they link the two columns. So I can specify how I want these two verbs to agree. Well, I want them to agree in lexical form. They have to be the same word, moot in this case, or whatever other lexical form. And in this case, they were both in the call stem. So I'm going to check stem and say they have to agree in stem. I don't know if they have to agree in stem, and I could test that, test that later. But for right now, we'll assume, okay, let's say agreement by stem is important here. So now I've defined this search graphically, and notice I can look at this and relatively simply say, okay, well, here's a verb infinitive absolute. I want to find that followed by a verb in the imperfect within 5 words, and they have to agree in lexical form and stem. So, this is relatively easy to decipher. If I leave this and come back 3 days later, I can still have a pretty good idea of what it's going to do. And now when I hit return, I get the results of that search in the window where it was linked. So I get achol tochel, you may freely eat or surely eat, mot tamut, mot tamutun. So here we get lo mot tamutun, you will not surely die, the serpent. Harba arbeh, I will greatly multiply or surely multiply your pains in childbearing, and so on. If I want to see, well, what lexical forms are used with this intensive construction, I can go to my search window and say, well, show me the analysis and give me a list of all the words that were found. In fact, let's count these down so that I can see, well, what are the words that are used most frequently with this kind of intensive construction? Well, you get moot, that's the big winner, you will surely die. But you also get yada, know for certain, haya, you will surely live, shuv, you will surely return, asa, you will surely make, and so on. So these are the words that are most frequently used in this particular construction. Now, one of those is kind of interesting. Here we have shuv, to return. Well, in what situation would you emphatically say you'll return? The first time I saw that, I thought, well, maybe those are promises of return from exile. But I didn't know. So let's test, well, how do we specify shuv as the lexical form that we want to look at? We can go back to our construct and we can drag a lex item into that first column, and I'll look for shuv. And notice that it now has two items in that column. It's kind of like there's a little @ symbol between those two items. Both of these things have to be true. And I don't need to specify that this verb is shuv because we've already specified agreement by lexical form. So if this one's shuv, this one's got to be shuv. And now I'll do that search, and we can look at the results here. So we get, I will surely return to you about this time next year. That's the angel of the Lord promising Abraham, I'm going to come back in a year and your wife will be pregnant. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. So she's not willing to, no, actually it's here. Must I then take your son back to the land from which he came? So, it's, if she won't come back with me, do I take Isaac to Haran and have him live there? And Abraham says, no, if in that case, you're off the hook. Joseph's brothers, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back, will return to us what we did to him. And then Exodus, if you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you must bring it back to him. You're not going to want to because you don't like the guy, but do it anyway. So quite a broad range of meanings for shuv, none of which are promises of return to exile, from exile. The closest thing to that is, I think in Joshua, it says, if you turn back from following me and follow the nations, then you'll go into exile. But that's kind of the opposite. So that's how you can, go in and use the construct window to do really interesting searches. And let's take shuv out of here and let's test this and see, well, is agreement by stem necessary? What I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck stem so that these agree in lexical form. And I'm going to drag another agree item and specify stem here, but this agree item I'm going to negate with a not symbol. So now I've said these two have to agree in lexical form, but they can't agree in stem. Does that ever happen? And it does happen. So here we get mot umat. So mot is in the kal stem, but umat is in the hofal stem. And we can do our, let's do our analysis here. And instead of the lexical forms, I'm going to customize my analysis and say, you know what, just show me the stems that were found. And I need to do that actually for both words. Customize display. I need to add a column and delete the lexical form here and add stem. All right, so here we can see it's almost always, the infinitive absolute is almost always in the call stem, except once it's PL and once it's pilpil, which is, I believe, an Aramaic stem. And then the variation always happens in the imperfect. And notice it's nifal and hofal, both of those tend to be used as passive forms. And then the PL and the hifil are interesting. That would be kind of interesting to check out. Why are they using those stems there? But you can see, you know, I'm just playing around with dragging items onto the construct window, and I'm doing high-level Hebrew research here. But it's all relatively simple to do. That's the beauty of the construct window. And of course, you can get much more complicated, and you can use syntactical tags, which I haven't done. You can get really fancy with the construct window, but that's basically how the construct window works.
Well, thanks a lot, David. We have a lot more questions, but we've really not only run out of time, but we've gone over quite a bit. And we've got another webinar coming up in about an hour with Dr. Roy Brown, and you're not going to want to miss that. Let me just mention too that we have a lot of video webinars related to Hebrew construct searches and so forth, pre-recorded. So if you go to the support page and check out webinars there, you'll see a page filled with a lot of these kinds of things that really go into a lot more depth than what David has time to do right now. But that was a great overview. I really appreciate that. So Linda or Richard, anything else?
There are the discount codes there in the chat box, and also you'll get an email in about an hour with the recording, and the codes will be there again. If you have a question today that wasn't answered, if you'll email that to me, just respond to any of the emails you get from me, and I will get that to David, and we'll get an answer to you, because I know we still did have some that weren't answered.
Yeah, I'll be
I
happy
don't
to
know.
answer any questions you have. I'm sorry I couldn't get to them all.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we want to do a follow-up session or something just for questions, and people who didn't get their questions answered could come to that. But thank you all so much, though, for joining us today, and we will get that information out to you.
All right, well, thank you
And
very much
let's
for
see.
attending. Hope it was helpful.